Welcome back to the Unseen Podcast, a podcast dedicated to missing people, unresolved cases, and UK true crime. Today we're going to be exploring the disappearance of Gloria Bielby in 1979. Her disappearance in Bilton, close to Hull in the East Riding of Yorkshire, was both mysterious and worrying, given that she left behind an 11-year-old son who still does not know what happened to his mother. Gloria Bielby has not been seen since 1979, and Humberside Police have since appealed for any new information. This episode discusses a missing person, but does also discuss other murders and sexual assaults, but not in any graphic detail. Listener discretion is always advised. Bilton is a village in the East Riding of Yorkshire with a population of around 2,300 people. It's located around 5 miles from the port city of Hull. It's a small village with residents enjoying a quiet life, close to the countryside and the nearby amenities of city life. The Bilby family lived in Bilton during the 1970s and consisted of Bernard, his wife Gloria, and their son Nigel. The family lived on Darnay Road in Bilton, and Bernard ran a butcher's shop in Bilton Grange in East Hull. Gloria worked as a secretary at the company Reckitt and Coleman, a household products company which had in 1938 become associated with Coleman's, famous for their mustard. The couple were well liked. Bernard's butcher shop was frequented by many people in the area, and he was reportedly a jovial and happy man who was friendly to everyone. Gloria has been described as a very beautiful woman with a personality to match. She was bubbly and outgoing and made friends easily. From the outside, Gloria and Bernard appeared to be a happy couple in their 30s, and their lives seemed to be going in the right direction. This, however, was not necessarily how it was on the inside of their relationship. Gloria and Bernard were not getting on well behind closed doors, and during the 1970s their relationship had begun to struggle along. From around 1974, the couple had begun sleeping in different rooms and had effectively separated, with different rotas for household chores so they didn't have to see one another. They decided, for the sake of their son, they would continue to live together in their home on Darnay Road. Bernard would later tell the Hull Daily Mail about the situation. For the last 5 years, we'd gone our own ways. I suppose we had different personalities. She liked the nightlife. I didn't. It seemed that they had grown apart and had realised they were very different people, and this must have been a very tricky situation to manage. But they continued on living together as amicably as possible throughout the 1970s. In May 1979, something had changed. Bernard Bilby phoned up the Humberside Police to file a missing person report. He explained to them that he hadn't seen or spoke to his wife Gloria in 3 months. The last time he remembered seeing her was on February the 1st, and he thought he'd heard her on February the 2nd. This must have seemed like an odd call for police, given that Bernard was only just reporting his wife missing that long afterwards. Bernard later explained the situation and that he and Gloria were actually separated. He also made the point that Gloria had gone away in the past, and as they weren't together, she didn't necessarily have to tell him where she was. He was now concerned, however, that Gloria hadn't even made any attempt to get in touch with her son, and given how loving of a mother she was, this was certainly unusual. Bernard told the Hull Daily Mail at the time, "She had gone away before for several days, telling me it was in connection with work. I've since found out it was nothing to do with work. I wasn't bothered because we only stayed together for the sake of the boy." It was definitely a different situation, and one that did concern police. Gloria hadn't attempted to ring or write to her son in that time, and the question was, why, and where was she? Humberside Police established that Gloria had last been seen on February 2nd, 1979, and began to figure out her movements the day prior. They discovered that on Thursday, February 1st, Gloria had been off from work at Reckitt and Coleman, as it was closed due to industrial action. At around 9:30 p.m, she visited her sister's home in Driffield, not far from her own home. She told her that she'd been in Bridlington and Driffield that day with what has been described as a male associate. At around 11 p.m. that night, Gloria's brother-in-law had walked her home the short distance to her house. When she arrived, Bernard made a statement that he gave Gloria £3,000 in cash as part of a separation settlement. She intended to buy a car from a local garage the next day and was going to use the money to do this. This amount has also been reported as £3,500, however it's unclear which is correct from the reporting. Bernard then explained that the following morning he woke up at around 6 a.m. and he heard what he thought was Gloria leaving the home and a car driving away from the house. Bernard later explained that it was at this point that he realised she must have left him, as he noticed that she had taken some of her clothes. He stated, "About 6 a.m. on Friday, February 2nd, the alarm went off. I woke up and just after this I heard Gloria leave the house and a car leave the driveway. I realised then that she'd left me. I always thought in the back of my mind she would leave me, but I was still upset." It seemed from that point Bernard believed that Gloria had simply left him, and that was why she hadn't been in touch. But the fact that she then didn't get in contact with their son made him concerned. Bernard reportedly told police that Gloria had mentioned to him a few months before she disappeared that she had a passport, and this was nowhere in the home. It was strange, however, that other personal paperwork that Gloria may have needed was left behind. And when police looked into it, there was no attempt by her to sort out any of her financial affairs. She had packed most of her clothes and had taken her jewellery. Police checked up on the fact that Gloria was meant to be paying for a Ford Capri car at a local garage on Friday the 2nd, and it appeared that she never arrived there to pay and drive the car away. Whatever had happened that day, Gloria had changed her plans. The other fact was that she hadn't let her employer know that she was planning on leaving her job. She hadn't mentioned it to her bosses or to any of her colleagues. Why had Gloria taken some of her things but not sorted out everything before she left? The disappearance was a puzzling one and must have been hugely distressing for everyone involved, including Gloria's family and, of course, her son. Police began looking into Gloria's life and, of course, her personal relationships. This led police down a path which would come to define the narrative in this case. Much of the reporting seems to focus on Gloria's striking looks and her relationships with several other men. While Gloria's relationships were of course important to the investigation into her disappearance, we do also have to be sensitive to the fact that Gloria is still a missing person and her privacy still needs to be taken into account. It's clear that Gloria and Bernard were separated, and so it's reported that Gloria did have relationships with other men during the time that she and Bernard were still living together. The nature of these relationships are mostly unknown. However, police were interested in several different people who had been seen with Gloria, or people who had associated with her over the years. One person they were particularly interested in tracking down was a man that neighbours had identified as visiting the house several times during lunchtime hours, and they had actually seen him on Friday the 2nd of February. Neighbours reported seeing a smartly dressed man that they had come to nickname Dapper Dan pull up around mid-morning on that Friday that Gloria disappeared. He pulled up in a red Ford Escort outside Gloria's home. Gloria then came out with a suitcase and he helped her put it into the car. The pair then drove off. This seemed like an important piece of information, however it did conflict with Bernard's account of that morning. He stated that Gloria left at 6 a.m. Whether Bernard then left for work and Gloria returned home for more of her belongings is unclear. However, there are no reports that state that neighbours also saw her leaving at 6 a.m, or that they saw her returning before finally leaving for good. The fact that this man had been seen at the house on several occasions led credence to the fact that he could have been there that day. However, it also could suggest that these neighbours were remembering the wrong day and simply believed it to be February the 2nd. Police were looking into this 3 months after Gloria disappeared, and therefore people's memories may not have been as fresh as they could have been. Regardless, this man had known Gloria, and so it was important to try and track him down. He was described as about 40 years old, 5 foot 9 inches tall, of a slim build and had greying hair. He apparently looked like an executive type. It's reported in the Hull Daily Mail that this man may have matched the description of a man who worked as a newspaper seller and lived less than a mile from Bernard's butcher shop. He also sometimes carried out errands for Bernard. This, however, seems to be speculative information and may have had nothing to do with that man at all. There was another man that police were interested in tracing, and this man had been seen visiting Gloria at work. This man had picked her up at Reckitt's and Coleman during July and August of 1978. He was seen picking her up at lunchtimes in a red Morris 1100 car. This man was described as well-built with dark hair, and he usually wore an open-neck shirt and didn't wear a tie or a jacket. Whether either of these men were important to the investigation was unknown. However, they may have been able to paint a picture of what was going on with Gloria at the time that she did disappear. Gloria's disappearance captured the attention of the local area, and people were concerned about where she had gone. Bernard also began to be the centre of attention from local people, and despite being well liked at his butcher's shop, the community began to wonder if he could have had anything to do with Gloria's disappearance. In their mind, he had been the last one to see Gloria, and he hadn't reported her missing for 3 months. Gloria had also been reportedly seeing other men, and to some people in the local community, this was a motive, regardless of their understanding of Gloria and Bernard's relationship. It's reported in the Hull Daily Mail that members of the community didn't hesitate to comment on the fact that they thought Bernard had something to do with Gloria's disappearance, with one person spray painting a message on the wall of his home. They disrespectfully wrote, "Gloria sausages, sold here." Bernard denied any involvement in the disappearance of his wife, but it was a line of inquiry that police had to check on. Bernard was interviewed several times in relation to it, but police couldn't and haven't, by the looks of it, since found anything to link him to her disappearance. They did follow up and reportedly checked the meat grinder that he used at his shop, but nothing was found that was unusual or out of the ordinary. For his part, Bernard offered a £500 reward for anyone that knew anything about Gloria's disappearance, and did appeal for information about her whereabouts. One of the lines of inquiry that police were hoping to follow up on was the news that before she disappeared, Gloria had told friends and family that she was worried because she had been receiving nuisance calls to her home. She even mentioned it on the evening before she went missing at her sister's home, saying that she didn't really want to return home because she didn't want to receive any more phone calls. This seemed to be something that had disturbed and possibly scared Gloria. However, it would seem that she never divulged any suspicions of who this person could be that was making them. We also don't know the content of these calls. The general feeling that police seemed to have at the time was that someone must have information that they had just not divulged yet. During the next several months and years, police continued to try and find out if Gloria had left, then where had she gone to? This was proving extremely difficult, as despite Gloria having many friends and knowing many people, no one seemed to be offering up the crucial information about where she went. Christmas of 1979 came and went without Gloria contacting anyone in her family, and sadly without sending her son a Christmas card or present. This was certainly out of character for Gloria, who everyone described as a devoted mother. Detective Superintendent Carmichael, who was leading the investigation at the time, spoke in 1980 about Gloria's disappearance, and he explained that they had checked as many different official channels as they could to track her down, including through the passport office and Interpol. Gloria had had a passport issued, as Bernard had suggested, but it was a yearly passport and had expired in October 1979. It had not been renewed. 8 sightings had come in from places around the world, like Sweden, Germany, and Mallorca in Spain. Detective Superintendent Carmichael described all of these as well-intentioned mistakes and had nothing to do with Gloria's disappearance. Other official places, such as Department of Employment, were checked, and there was no sign of Gloria in any records, or something that looked like it could be an alternate identity. He explained, "The investigation is based on the 90% possibility that serious harm has befallen her. In spite of all the publicity it has received, there has not been one iota of concrete information as to her current whereabouts." He added, "We have looked into all motives for her disappearance, but the case remains a complete mystery. I do not accept that a woman as attractive and respectable as this lady could just disappear off the face of the earth without trace. Neither do I accept that she could be so callous and hard-hearted that she would neglect to contact her family if she were able." Detective Superintendent Carmichael renewed his appeal for information and hoped at that time someone would come forward with information. He also appealed to Gloria herself, stating that he would accept a phone call from her saying she's safe and well, and that he did not want to pry into her life further if she had just walked away from her life. This, however, did not appear to be what the police believed to be the most likely outcome in the case. That year, Gloria's family felt that they could get their hopes up when one of her relatives was watching an episode of the TV show The Professionals. They spotted someone in the background who looked very much like Gloria and rang Humberside Police with the tip. Officers travelled down to London to speak to the agencies that dealt with the extras in the programme and managed to track down the woman in question. They were able to ascertain that this was not Gloria. Detectives stated that they were back at square one. During the next several years, many tips were called into police, and all of them were followed up on. In 1981, police were investigating Tranby Lodge, a Grade 2 listed building in Hull, after a man called in a tip saying he saw a woman who looked like Gloria entering there with a man in the spring of 1979. They got out of a red car of a similar description to the man saw driving her away on the day she disappeared. Nothing, however, was found there. In 1981, police were also trying to ascertain whether the body of a woman found near Scarton Moor, close to Sutton Bank in North Yorkshire, could be Gloria's. This unidentified woman came to be known as the nude in the nettles, due to how she was recovered. The body was ruled out as belonging to Gloria, and the nude in the nettles is still unidentified and is a case we reported early on in the podcast. In 1982, it was reported that Bernard Bilby had divorced Gloria. This became quite big news given that Gloria was still missing and CID officers were involved with the case. He was granted a decree absolute to end the marriage, and when asked about it, Bernard stated, "There's nothing I wish to say. I don't want to go into details." That same year, officers searched the area of Market Weighton in the East Riding of Yorkshire. The search came about due to a tip-off from a clairvoyant who stated that they had a vision that Gloria's body was in that area. With a lack of other evidence, Humberside Police did take it seriously, and members of the Underwater Search Unit and the Force Support Group searched the stream and the area around there extensively, but found nothing of interest. In 1983, police received an anonymous letter stating that Gloria may have been buried in the back garden of a home in Coltman Street in Hull. The back garden was dug up by hand by officers and sniffer dogs were brought in. However, again, like other searches, nothing of interest was found. Police were very interested in finding out who had authored the anonymous letter and published a picture of it in the Hull Daily Mail. It was reported that the letter had no stamp, and therefore police were unsure where it was posted, but they believed it had come from someone who was probably local to Hull. Police stated that they wanted to discuss the implications of the letter with the person who wrote it. Nothing, however, seemed to have come from this appeal, and in the years that followed, articles were published discussing Bernard Bilby's private life, and explaining that he had gotten remarried and moved out of the home that he and Gloria shared in Darnay Road. While it was reported that Bernard may have moved on in that respect, it's clear that Gloria's family hadn't, and of course neither had her son at the disappearance of his mother. In 1987, Gloria's case was reinvigorated when it began to be linked to an awful crime that had been committed in Bristol. On the 8th of October 1987, 29-year-old Shirley Banks went shopping at the Broadmead shopping area in Bristol. It was around 7:40 p.m. and she was going to meet her husband Richard for a drink afterwards, but she never turned up. When she hadn't returned the next morning, Richard rang up her work, only to be told she rang up sick 15 minutes earlier. Richard was concerned and rang police after she hadn't returned that night. To begin with, police were unsure of what had happened to Shirley. However, more investigation into the suspect in another crime led them to John Kanan. Kanan was wanted after an assault on a shop assistant in Leamington Spa. Passerbys had chased him, and police eventually arrested him. Upon his arrest, they found a knife with blood on it, rope, some of which was concealed in a toilet cistern, and an imitation handgun. Kanan was known to police and had been arrested for several different crimes in this past, including rape and robbery. He had previously held up shop assistants at knife point and attacked his own wife. Police knew he was a violent man and that he should be looked into closely. The day before Shirley's disappearance, a woman named Julia Holman had been attacked in Bristol, and the man had tried to abduct her at gunpoint, but Julia had bravely fought the man off and managed to get away. This near abduction and then disappearance of another woman was certainly worrying, and the attack by John Kanan in the same month led police to look more closely into him as a suspect. 3 weeks after Shirley disappeared, police searched Kanan's car and found a tax disc inside a briefcase in his glove compartment. This tax disc belonged to Shirley Banks's car. When police searched a lock-up garage at his block of flats, inside they found Shirley's orange Mini Clubman, which had been painted blue, clearly in an effort to disguise its identity. Police later recovered Shirley's body 6 months after she went missing in the Quantock Hills in Somerset. It was clear that she had been hit over the head many times with what was thought to be a rock. Police were able to link Kanan to Shirley's murder through fingerprints found in his home and also blood that was found on a raincoat, which could not be discounted as belonging to Shirley's blood group. Kanan was charged and convicted on her murder in 1989. He was also convicted of the attack of Julia Holman after she positively identified him as the perpetrator. This was not the last that was heard of John Kanan, however, as he has long been one of the only suspects in the infamous disappearance of Susie Lamplugh in 1986 in Fulham. Susie was an estate agent who had gone to show a possible client around a home in Shorrolds Road in Fulham on the 28th of July 1986. The client had given a name of Mr. Kipper, and Susie attended the viewing of the home. She never returned to work, and she has been missing ever since. Susie's case is a huge one with lots of investigation and twists and turns, which I won't go into in this episode. But I have covered it on the podcast previously, so feel free to listen to that more in depth. Mr. Kipper was of huge interest to police, and they knew it was a false name. Police now believe that John Kanan could have been this man. Kanan was known to frequent pubs in Fulham and was suspected earlier on in his life to possibly be the house for sale rapist. During the 1970s and early 80s, a man was attacking and raping women in the West Midlands. These attacks were taking place in homes that were for sale in the area, and he was then attacking women who were alone there. This, of course, was strikingly similar to what police believe had happened to Susie that day when she visited the house. It was also known that Kanan had visited Shorrolds Road itself a few days before Susie disappeared, but when he discovered that the woman in the home wasn't alone and her husband was there, he left. There were many circumstantial pieces of evidence to link Kanan to Susie Lamplugh, and he was arrested several times during 2000 and 2001 about her possible murder. Kanan reportedly denied any involvement and provided the police with little information. He continues to deny any involvement in many of the crimes that he has committed. Humberside Police were interested in John Kanan as a possible suspect in Gloria's disappearance. It's unclear exactly why they believe that Kanan may have been responsible. However, the one thing that may have been an important fact was that she had last been seen getting into a car with a smartly dressed man who looked like an executive type. Kanan was known to dress smartly and be relatively charming. He could come across as someone who was successful, and this may have been a draw for Gloria. Kanan was also known to join dating agencies to meet women. It would appear, however, that Humberside Police made no links to Kanan in the end, and may well have just been covering all of their bases with the investigation. Gloria's case seems to go cold after this, and despite the huge amount of investigation that happened during the 1980s, little evidence or new information was forthcoming. This is the way that Gloria's case remained, and still remains today. In 2013, Humberside Police reopened the investigation and hoped to uncover new information or evidence that could finally help to solve the mystery. At the time, Detective Chief Inspector Matt Hutchinson said, "This is a review of a long-term missing person. We are exploring the possibility she came to some harm. She may well have had an accident or committed suicide. We need to review all of the case papers and explore all of the possibilities. We will be going right back to the beginning, looking at the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and all of the work that was done at the time around her lifestyle, her home life, and the people she associated with. We will be concentrating on the last time she was seen and what the inquiry found after that. We have spoken to her family and a number of other witnesses. The feelings of the detectives at the time was that there were a lot of people who knew Gloria and socialised with her, and they may have had more information than was originally passed on to police. It's never too late to come forward with any information. We would like to know who she was seeing at the time, what her movements were, and the places she frequented, because it might give us a clue as to who she might have gone missing with, or where she might have ended up. People will remember this case. Gloria was beautiful and was well known in the local area. It was a very high-profile case at the time. There were lots of rumours and speculation as to what might have happened to her. We will be exploring every one of these rumours to establish if there is any truth to them. The reopening of the investigation was a significant step. However, despite the hope that something would be uncovered, Gloria's case remained unsolved and a mystery. In 2019, another development was made when an inquest was finally scheduled in Gloria's case. The inquest looked at all of the information available, and Assistant Coroner David Rosenberg concluded that the only reasonable thing that he could conclude was that she was dead. He said, over 40 years have elapsed and no evidence has been produced about Mrs. Bilby trying to contact her son or other members of her family, and that there was no proof of life on any data record. She was officially declared dead 40 years after going missing, and this must have been a huge moment for Gloria's family, and I'm sure a distressing one. Detective Superintendent Matt Baldwin from Humberside Police also spoke to the inquest, saying, "We have a number of unsolved cases which are never closed. Gloria Bielby's disappearance is one such case which will continue to be reviewed by the Major Crime Unit. Not knowing is bad enough. Losing a loved one but not knowing what happened or having a place to go to pay respects must be unbearable. Certainly this case has been high profile, and having to live through this must have been very difficult in the intervening 40 years. Gloria Bilby's case has been fraught with speculation and insinuation from the beginning of the investigation, and has been a high-profile case within the local community. What happened to Gloria? Much has been made of the fact that Gloria was seeing other men at the time that she disappeared, and this must somehow mean that she did just walk away from her life. But we also have to remember that she was a loving mother of an 11-year-old son, and she has not once tried to contact him after she left. Would she really have done this voluntarily? This is the point that makes me think twice, along with the fact that there has been no proof of life found for her after all these years. If she was killed, who did it and why? Was it someone that she knew, or was it a stranger? Were those nuisance calls relevant to her disappearance, and if they were, who was doing it? There are so many unknowns in this case, like many missing people. But Gloria's family deserve answers to all of these questions, and her case is no less relevant to them, despite the time that has passed by. Humberside Police have stated, "This was an extensive investigation, during which many lines of inquiry were exhausted. We regularly conduct reviews of long-term missing people. Unsolved cases are never closed. However, they often remain inactive for periods of time. Humberside Police will continue to take any tips or evidence, and so if you do know anything about Gloria Bielby's disappearance, then please do contact them either on 101 or at Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to support the podcast further, then you can on Patreon and contribute to the exclusive polls to get extra bonus episodes every month. You can also get access to new episodes early and ad-free. You can use the link in the show notes to visit Patreon and see what we offer. You can also support us by reviewing the podcast wherever you listen, including Spotify, and also just share the episodes. You can subscribe on YouTube and follow us on social media. You can also subscribe and listen to my other podcast, 10-Minute True Crime, which tells infamous crimes in a short form, bite-sized 10 minutes, for people on the go or who just like the facts. Find that wherever you listen and in the show notes. As always, I'm Caprice, and this has been Unseen.